For over 130 years, one name has haunted the streets of Victorian London: Jack the Ripper. A ghost, a monster, a mystery carved in flesh and fear. That is, until now. In recent years, a claim has exploded across headlines. The Ripper has been identified. Not by a confession, not by a deathbed letter, but by a faded shawl carrying traces of blood and DNA. And it all pointed to one man, a Polish immigrant named Aaron Kosminski. But is this really the final answer? The evidence is compelling. The pushback is fierce. And the implications are far more complex than any headline can capture. Let's unravel it. Fall 1888. Whitechapel, a slum at the edge of the British Empire's glittering crown. Overcrowded, underpoliced, reeking of soot and sewage. Then the bodies began appearing. 5 women with real lives, long before their deaths to find them. Mary Ann Nichols, 43, a mother of 5 struggling with homelessness. Annie Chapman, 47, once middle class, now selling flowers to survive while battling tuberculosis. Elizabeth Stride, 44, a Swedish immigrant found with her throat cut, but, unlike the others, no mutilation. Catherine Eddowes, 46, born in Wolverhampton, with a tattoo of her initials on her forearm, and a partner, John Kelly, who was devastated by her death. Mary Jane Kelly, just 25, the youngest and by far the most violently killed. Their murders were targeted and escalating, though not always in a straight line. Stride's killing showed restraint. Kelly's was savage beyond description. The pattern was uneven, but the press didn't care about nuance. Victorian newspapers didn't just report on the killings, they manufactured the Ripper. In late September, a letter arrived at the Central News Agency, written in red ink and signed "Yours truly, Jack the Ripper." This Dear Boss letter was almost certainly written by a journalist, not the killer. Most modern experts agree on that. But it didn't matter. The name stuck. Other letters followed, hundreds of them. The most chilling, the From Hell letter, arrived with half a preserved human kidney. Fear spread like wildfire. Queen Victoria herself urged authorities to catch this fiend. Despite stakeouts and arrests, Jack vanished. No more bodies. Just silence. A myth was born. Not from evidence, but from ink, fear, and the void where answers should have been. Aaron Kosminski arrived in London in the early 1880s, a Jewish immigrant fleeing anti-Semitic pogroms in Poland. He settled in Whitechapel, worked as a hairdresser, and lived within walking distance of all 5 murder sites. Context matters here. Whitechapel was home to tens of thousands of Eastern European Jewish immigrants, met with suspicion and hostility. When the killings began, anti-Semitic sentiment surged. Graffiti near one crime scene read, "The Jews are the men that will not be blamed for nothing." Police Commissioner Warren ordered it erased before it could be photographed, fearing riots. In this atmosphere, Jewish residents were prime suspects, not because of evidence, but because of prejudice. In 1894, Sir Melville Macnaghten drafted an internal police memo, the Macnaghten Memorandum, naming 3 suspects: Montague John Druitt, a barrister who drowned himself after the final murder. Macnaghten appeared to favor him. Aaron Kosminski, described as insane with strong homicidal tendencies. Michael Ostrog, a con man likely incarcerated in France during the murders. Separate notes by Chief Inspector Swanson, the Swanson Marginalia, added that Kosminski was identified by a witness who then refused to testify against a fellow Jew. These are different sources, written at different times, shaped by the biases of their era. What's certain, Kosminski's mental health collapsed. He was committed to Colney Hatch Asylum in 1891. Auditory hallucinations, paranoid delusions, self-neglect so extreme he ate from gutters. He later transferred to Leavesden Asylum where he died in 1919. Never charged, never tried, nearly forgotten, until a single piece of cloth dragged him back. In 2007, author Russell Edwards bought an old silk shawl at auction, allegedly taken from Catherine Eddowes' crime scene by acting Sergeant Amos Simpson in 1888. Simpson's wife refused it, and the shawl passed through the family for over a century. Edwards handed it to molecular biologist Dr. Jerry Leheleinen for DNA analysis. Here's what you need to understand. DNA comes in 2 relevant forms. Nuclear DNA is the gold standard, unique to each person, capable of definitive identification. But it degrades quickly, especially over 130 years. Mitochondrial DNA is more durable, but far less specific. It identifies a maternal lineage, not an individual. Thousands of people alive today could share the same mitochondrial profile. On the shawl, Llewellyn found blood traces consistent with someone suffering from Bright's disease, Catherine Eddowes' known condition, and semen containing mitochondrial DNA matching a living descendant of Kosminski's sister. In March 2019, the findings were published in the Journal of Forensic Sciences. Headlines screamed, "Jack the Ripper identified." But almost immediately, the science began unraveling. Shortly after publication, researchers found a critical error. A mutation reported as a rare distinguishing marker turned out to be common across the general European population. The match was far less specific than claimed. In 2024, the Journal of Forensic Sciences issued an expression of concern. Raw data was missing and results couldn't be replicated. Beyond the sequencing error, mitochondrial DNA was inherently limited. Even a perfect match wouldn't prove Kosminski was there, only that someone from his maternal lineage was. In a neighborhood dense with Eastern European Jewish immigrants from the same Polish regions, the pool of potential matches was enormous. Then there's the shawl itself. It was never recorded in any police file or evidence log. Its connection to Eddowes rests entirely on family oral tradition. For 130 years it passed through hands, collectors, and auction houses, handled barehanded by dozens. A contamination nightmare. Dr. Turi King, who identified Richard III's remains, called the provenance anecdotal at best. Dr. Walter Parson, a leading forensic expert, called aspects of the study unpublishable. Edwards stood firm. He argued the DNA match plus Kosminski's profile made the case compelling. The honest assessment, the evidence is suggestive but far from conclusive. More than nothing, this isn't just a scientific debate. It's a deeply human one. Descendants of Catherine Eddowes have stepped forward. "We don't want revenge," one told CBS. "We just want the truth." But truth cuts both ways. Aaron Kosminski never faced a jury. He spent 28 years in asylums, suffering from what modern psychiatry would likely diagnose as severe schizophrenia. To brand him as history's most infamous killer based on contested evidence and Victorian-era suspicions shaped partly by anti-Semitism is not justice. It's a story imposed on the dead by the living. The eagerness to name a Jewish immigrant as the Ripper echoes uncomfortable historical patterns. The original suspicion was inseparable from the prejudices of the era. DNA evidence doesn't carry prejudice, but framing does. And linking mental illness to serial murder reinforces one of the most damaging stigmas in public health. People with schizophrenia are far more likely to be victims of violence than perpetrators. Kosminski may have been the Ripper, but may have been is not was. The gap between those phrases is where ethics lives. Beyond the suspect question lies an even deeper challenge. Elizabeth Stride, the one victim without mutilation, has long troubled researchers. Was she interrupted or killed by someone else entirely? If Stride's murder was unrelated, the canonical 5 become 4. And if the victim count is uncertain, then everything built on it, the behavioral profile, the geographic analysis, the psychological speculation, shifts. Some criminologists suggest the broader Whitechapel murders file, which included 11 victims between 1888 and 1891, may reflect multiple perpetrators. If true, Jack the Ripper was never one man. He was a myth, a fusion of shadows under one terrifying name, assembled by the press and calcified by 130 years of speculation. The quest to name the Ripper may be fundamentally misconceived, a search for one answer to what was never one question. Jack the Ripper was never just a man. He was a creation, assembled from ink, fear, and failure. The myth endures because it contains the horror. It lets us imagine the Whitechapel's evil lived in one monster, rather than in the grinding machinery of poverty and misogyny that made these murders possible. The 5 women who died weren't killed because a shadow lurked in the fog. They were killed because they lived in a world that had already discarded them, invisible until dead, famous only for how they died. Giving the Ripper a name doesn't change that. The Kosminski theory is the strongest specific claim we have. It's supported by contested DNA, circumstantial suspicion, and geographic proximity, but it falls short of proof. The responsible position is to hold both facts at once, to take the evidence seriously without declaring the mystery solved, to acknowledge the victims without exploiting their stories. The question isn't just who was Jack the Ripper. It's, what do we do with a mystery that refuses to end? Aaron Kosminski may have been the Ripper. The evidence points in his direction, but it doesn't arrive. The 5 women who died in Whitechapel deserve more than a mystery. They deserve to be remembered as people. What do you think? Does the DNA evidence convince you, or are there still too many unanswered questions? Share your thoughts in the comments. We read everyone. If this kind of evidence-driven storytelling matters to you, subscribe. More investigations are coming, and we approach every one with the same commitment to getting it right. Until next time, stay curious, stay skeptical, and remember, the truth doesn't owe us comfort.